Hello and thanks for joining me. Well, it's about time I did another Q&A session because I've got a few questions have been piling up and I owe people the courtesy of an answer. Now, it's a beautiful morning here on the Isle of Anglesey, so I thought, why not do this in my outside broadcast studio? I really should be out taking pictures, to be fair. Anyway, let's crack on, and I am going to read from my iPad so that I don't miss anything. So this first question is from Matthew Jones. I've just bought a set of 3 ND filters, soft, hard and a big stopper. Any chance you could do a snippet of the best ways to make the most of them in different times of the day? Well, Matthew, what I would say is that using filters isn't necessarily tied in specifically to the times of the day. And the 3 specific filters that you've bought there will have specific applications. So let's cover the first one that you probably would use the least, and that's the hard grad. What that means is that the transition between the darker area and the lighter area of the filter is more of a hard line between the two. Usually you'll only find instances where that's going to be useful to you, where you've got a very distinct flat horizon. So for example, on a seascape or a body of still water like this lake behind me. And the time of day isn't really that relevant, because what you'll be looking for is a situation at any time of the day where you've got a bright sky and a dark ground, and you want to kind of even up that exposure so that your camera can cope with it more easily. And so that's a really good time where you'd use that hard grad, because the edge of the graduation, you park that right on the horizon and that'll help you out immensely. With the soft grad, because the transition is much more gentle from dark to light, and I use a soft grad pretty much all the time, you'll use that pretty much all the time where you've got a bright sky in your image and a dark ground, but your horizon line is a bit wobbly. Mountains, trees, anything that isn't flat, basically. So that's when you'll find that useful. Now, a big stopper, you'd really only find that useful if you've got some movement in your composition. Because if you've got nothing moving in the composition, all that's going to do is slow your shutter speed down unnecessarily. But if you've got clouds that are moving across the sky or water that's moving, and you want to have your shutter open for 5, 10, 15 seconds and in low light, 5 minutes even, and really smooth out whatever's moving in front of the camera, that's where you'd use a big stopper. So I hope that's helpful. But the main thing is, get out there, stick them on the front of your lens and have some fun. Okay. 3 questions in from Ray Briggs, and Ray was writing in response to a hike video that I did where I did a wild camp on a Snowdonia ridge. Ray asks, do you find those walking sticks you were using are helpful? And Ray's referring, of course, to the trekking poles that I use. Ray, the short answer is, when you're an old git like me, they're incredibly helpful. They come in really useful to kind of drag yourself up an incline, but much more importantly, when you're going down an incline, they allow you to put them into the ground and get a really steady position before you step down. They take a lot of strain off your leg joints, and they kind of allow you to follow the basics of rock scrambling, where you always have 3 points of contact. You only ever move 1 point of contact at a time. By using these, you've got 2 extra points of contact with the ground. When you're carrying a heavy backpack, they're really, really helpful. I actually bought this lot because I forgot to take some out with me, and I was going on a hike. So I swung by an outdoors shop in Betws-y-Coed because I couldn't contemplate doing that hike without some trekking poles. So they're very highly recommended. Ray's next question is about, where do you park when you're out hiking? Well, of course, it depends where you're hiking, but it is a concern. And, you know, sometimes you park up and you're in the middle of nowhere and you sort of think, am I going to come back and find the wheels missing? So far, I've always been quite lucky. But what I do try and do, if I can, is leave the car somewhere around where there are other cars as well, and around Snowdonia. Very often that is the case in this day and age. Ray's final question, where do you go to the loo when you're out camping? Well, first of all, not on your own doorstep, but there are some basic rules of thumb around that, Ray. Most hikers are aware that you would not dig a hole anywhere within 100 feet of a watercourse because of potential for contamination. So essentially you head off minimum 100 feet away from a pathway, a watercourse, anything like that, dig a hole and bury it. Just a couple more to finish off. Robert Falcon wrote in and he asked about, is it possible to combine 3 or 4 point focus stacking with exposure blending? Short answer to that is yes, absolutely it is. But what I would say, 3 or 4 points is a lot of focus stacking. Generally speaking, if you get your aperture right and you get your focusing point right, you shouldn't really need more than 3 at most in a focus stack, and that would only be in an instance where you've got something that is literally that far from the front of the lens. Usually with a focus stack you only need 2, and very often certainly with full frame landscape cameras and you're shooting at f11, f13, as I said, unless you've got something really close to the lens, you shouldn't need a focus stack. But if you do, and the composition requires an exposure blend, there's no reason at all why you shouldn't do that. And the best way to handle it in post, or the way that I would approach it in post, would be to do the exposure blends first, so you've then got X number of exposure blended images and then focus stack those. But yeah, perfectly possible. But if you're doing 3 or 4, it's probably a little bit more work than you need to be doing. And I would concentrate on getting your focusing right and your aperture right in camera. It'll make your life much easier. So just to finish up, Mike K wrote in, and he wrote in quite recently after I'd done a video at Aber Falls, where I was using my variable ND from the CCKO brand. And he says, you seem to support the use of a variable ND, but some YouTubers aren't so favourable towards it. Can you possibly do a vlog on its usage? To be honest with you, Mike, it doesn't warrant an entire vlog on its usage, but let me just show you a little bit more about it. I use a 72mm threaded one because that's the size of the main lens that I use for pretty much all of my landscapes. If you're going to buy one, I'd recommend you buy one for the biggest lens thread that you have. So say for example a 77mm, something like that. And then if you've got lenses with smaller diameters, get some step down rings, so you only have to buy the one rather than one for each of your lenses, because step down rings are only about £5 each. So the way this works is it's 2 separate elements that rotate independently, so kind of a bit like a screw-in circular polarizing filter. And you have a series of marks around the edge of it with a pointer which shows you from minimum to maximum, and as you turn it, it goes from light to dark. It's that simple, and it just replaces a whole heap of ND filters in your filter pouch. Now, there is an argument that the optical quality of this maybe isn't as good as having high quality glass filters, and I wouldn't argue against that. For my purposes though, it's sufficient, and certainly as opposed to having 4 or 5 glass filters, 400 or 500 quid's worth versus 15 or 20 quid's worth, I'll put up with its optical deficiencies, such as they are. Now this runs from ND2 to ND400. And what that means in photographer speak is ND2 is basically 1 stop. ND400 is 8 2/3 stops. So as near as damn it 9 stops. So not far off a big stopper which is 10 stops. But bear in mind each stop of light is double the amount of light of the previous one. So jumping from a 9 stop to a 10 stop is actually double the amount of darkening. So this allows you then to dial it in anywhere between 1 and 8 2/3 stops. And what I like about that is when I set my camera in aperture priority, I can just rotate this and my camera then is telling me what the shutter speed is going to be, and I just rotate this. I don't care how dark this is. When my camera says that'll be 1 second, thank you very much, perfect, that's job done as far as I'm concerned. And so in those situations where I want to control moving water, that's what I'd go to. So thank you ever so much for your questions. If anyone's got any more questions, don't hesitate. I'll be doing another one of these videos at some point, no doubt. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you found it useful, and if you haven't done it yet, why not subscribe now and join me next time. Cheers.